And I'll begin speaking in just a few moments. And during that time, perhaps rather than see a speaker speaking and a listener listening, we can remove that subject object duality and recognize there is speaking happening, but there is no speaker. There is listening happening, but there is no listener. Just as the Buddhist psychologist Mark Epstein would say, there are thoughts, but no thinker. Hmm. So, hello, welcome, namaste. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to those of you for joining me in the room. Thanks to those of you on Zoom. And thanks to those of you listening to the recording later. Welcome to a little Dharma talk that I like to call Living from the Heart. All about this extraordinary journey of 18 inches, a journey which can sometimes take many lifetimes just to travel from the head to the heart. And I'd like to start with a poem of my own as a lead in to this week's teaching and talk. We'll finish with a short meditation to integrate what we've talked about, and finally save some time at the end for question and answer. Today's poem is untitled from my poetry collection, Pebbles. Do you really think order is marching in formation, the corner of ninth and G, alphabetized books? Order is tapping your foot to music, sitting without pressure, growing without rushing, heart and step in parallel. Thanks for the reminder, I said, thanking the tree, leaving its leaves to return to my home of right angles. And I'd like to talk today about the many meanings of this word Dharma. After all, this is a Dharma talk. And I thought at a certain point, I should probably explain and expound upon all the different things that Dharma can mean and all the different ways that we can integrate this idea of Dharma into our own life. So, one meaning of Dharma that you might have heard is what you might call purpose. You might also call it duty. You might also call it destiny. Now, historically speaking, Dharma did refer to one's duty with a basic idea that if your parents were farmers, you would be a farmer. If your parents were in the business of shoemaking, you would be a shoemaker. That you have a certain duty in this life, of which in a small town, in a small village, largely you had a duty to your own family to kind of pick up the trade that you were born into. So we'll talk about a very important phrase that you find often in the scriptures, which is that your karma makes your dharma. And there's a few ways we can interpret this statement. But in this case, if we acknowledge the reality or the cosmology of karma and reincarnation, is that all your accumulated karma from all of your previous lives has decided your current birthplace, lifespan, and life circumstances. So, like the Zen koan, who were you before your parents were born? We're here to discover an essence in our being that goes beyond life and death, that stays constant. So sometimes we say, who were you before your parents were born? Or what was your original face? So the basic idea is that if you were born into a family of shoemakers, that was your karma. Your karma is to be a shoemaker. And when you look at the text like the Bhagavad Gita, you see this struggle. You see Arjuna on the battlefield talking to Krishna, which is in this case is a representation of the divine. And you see the struggle of fulfilling one's duty. Sometimes what seems like our duty does not seem like the right thing to do. So Arjuna, first chapter of the Gita, becomes very despondent. He meets a struggle because he's supposed to be this great warrior, and he goes to the battlefield to lead his army into battle. And who does he see on the other side? Nothing but his own brothers and sisters and fellow human beings like himself. So this taps into this struggle that we all have between what we feel we are supposed to be doing, the certain societal or familial obligations that we are supposed to be fulfilling, our duty, with what we think is right. So while historically Dharma has meant duty, I do find most Westerners aren't the biggest fan of doing things simply out of duty. It's like when our parents tell us we have to clean our room, we have a certain resistance. We have a certain, well, who says I have to clean my room? So we have a bit of an individualistic mindset, this basic idea that I should be in complete control of my own actions and my own destiny, and I shouldn't have to feel obligated to do anything out of duty. So, as you will find, when people do translate certain sacred texts, is things change. All translations and commentaries are going to be a zeitgeist of the time. So, a lot of people nowadays prefer to talk about Dharma to mean purpose, to mean your own individual purpose on this planet. So, just as you were born into a family of shoemakers, now it's saying basically your karma has brought you into this life, and now there is your dharma that you must fulfill. You must sort of uncover and discover your own purpose, the reason that you were incarnated into this body. And it's that uncovering of, say, the duty or the obligations of society and our family, that is much of one's dharmic path. There's a story of a young child talking to their parent, and the child's starting to grow up and getting a sense of how things work in the world. So they say, Mom, what do you do for a living? What is your job? And the mom says, Well, I work at a college, and as you know, I'm an art teacher. I teach adults how to draw. And the child, quite perplexed at this response, says, You mean they forgot? They forgot how to draw? They forgot their creative and unique purpose on this planet? And I think we probably had all experienced that at a young age. Maybe we had a certain inkling, a certain intuition about what our unique dharma and purpose was on this planet. We thought, I'm going to be an artist, I'm going to be a musician, I'm going to ride horses for a living, I'm going to be in a boat and a canoe guiding other people on trips. And you were probably told that's not realistic. That's not really how one lives in this world. What you really need to do is XYZ, probably something along the lines of go to school and go to college and get a degree that's going to get you a job. And those jobs tend to be in all the neat little categories, the engineer, the doctor, the lawyer, etc. So, in discovering our unique purpose, what we might call Shva Dharma. Shva means one's own. So one's Shva Dharma often does require a bit of uncovering. So they say there are two important times in a person's life: the day that they are born and the day that they discover why. And D.H. Lawrence put it this way: people are not free when they are doing just what they like. People are only free when they are doing what their deepest self likes. And there is getting down to the deepest self, but it takes some diving because the deepest self is way down and the conscious self is an obstinate monkey. But of one thing we may be sure: if one wants to be free, one has to give up the illusion of doing what one likes and seek what it, in capital letters, it wishes done. Hmm. So, if you think of karma, or sorry, if you think of dharma as meaning duty or purpose, it's easy to, again, sort of conflate this with profession, with this idea that, oh, my dharma is to become a lawyer because my parents say so. But when we get into greater universal truths, when we get into the yogic texts, the Buddhist texts, they'll basically kind of say that, your specific profession or your specific job is really not that important. There's a Zen saying that to become enlightened means to become of no rank. Rank, like, in an army, people have different ranks up and down. But it is said that once you become awakened, you become no worse off than any king, but no better than any person in poverty. You are outside of this spectrum of rank. And because I think intuitively we know this, we know that the jobs that we have in this world are essential. That the janitor who cleans up the office of the CEO is doing just as important work of the CEO. Everyone has a unique role to play on this planet, and no role is any better than any other role. What matters most, and particularly this is the perspective of the Gita, what matters most is that you're fulfilling your role to the best of your ability. If you're a janitor, if you're a taxi driver, if you're a CEO, be the absolute best janitor or taxi driver or CEO that you can possibly be. Because you are actually made for so much more than that. Your true Dharma is to become free. It is to become enlightened. When we talk about the Buddhist path, for example, the goal of the Buddhist path is not to become a Buddhist, it is to become a Buddha, meaning an awakened being, someone who has liberated themselves from the wheel of conditioned existence known as samsara, which is to say, your more greater capital S self, deeper Dharma is liberation. Or as I like to call it, take the lesson that this life is offering you. I think of life as a lesson, and the lesson is love. And we have many chances as we can to learn the lesson. And if we don't, we'll get another chance in the next life. So when we talk about your karma making your dharma, we don't necessarily have to adopt a cosmological worldview of reincarnation, that you have accumulated karma from your previous lives, because we can recognize that we all have accumulated karma from this life. We all have conditioning from society and from culture and from our parents and from all the people around us. And this karmic conditioning creates our thought patterns, and if we aren't conscious of those thought patterns, they will keep us in bondage and keep us from being free. So, in other words, the second meaning of karma makes your dharma is that your stuff, your emotional baggage, your negative thought patterns is the work that you have to do in this world. Our task, our dharma of every human being on this planet is to awaken from the illusions of greed, hatred, and ill will and tap into the true path towards peace, love, forgiveness, and a calm, clear mind. So, Gandhi put it this way: your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. Jung put it this way: what's not brought to consciousness comes later as fate. So I do remember I was giving a talk one time on the samskaras, the latent impressions of the mind. And I asked the class, do we have free will? And I remember one student, it was almost before I even finished the question. He goes, of course we do. And I was like, wow, that's such a lovely knee jerk reaction to the question. There wasn't much of a space, you could say, between the stimulus and the response. And this is the spiritual perspective that by and large, the average human is caught up in a trance, is controlled by their own karmic conditioning. We give knee jerk reactions to the sensory input that the world offers us so that and then our path of awakening is to break out of these patterns because if we don't uh tap into our unconscious patterns, they will of course return to us as fate. So this is where the yogic path comes in, because if we have to recognize, if we are to change our destiny and our actions, we have to go further and further and further upstream to our thoughts. That is the root cause of the words, actions, habits, values, and destiny. So if you are here to meet your destiny, to manifest it, whatever your unique purpose is in the world, in order to make sure that you're living in line with your truth, you have to free yourself from your karmic conditioning, and it all starts at the level of thought. So that is why we take what is sometimes called the backwards step or the inwards step or the U-turn, is because we have to recognize that our entire life springs forth from the tip of our intention. And our task is to awaken from the karmic conditioning that keeps us in bondage to living with intention. And we become masters of our mind through the practice of yoga and meditation. So that's one. All of that was just one perspective of Dharma that we can take. It can mean duty, it can mean purpose, and it can mean one's larger purpose, that you are made for so much more than whatever your profession is in this life. Another definition of Dharma is quite simple. It means teachings. So spiritual teachings. So you can have yogic dharma and Jain dharma and Hindu dharma. These are all just a compendium of spiritual teachings that we can learn from. So you might be told to even learn about the dharma. And a lot of dharma talks are this basic idea that we're just going to take some time to express spiritual truths. Now, I find most commonly when people do talk about dharma as teachings, while there is yoga and Jain and Hindu Dharma, I do find most commonly when people use the term Dharma and Dharma talk to mean teachings, they're referring to the teachings of the Buddha. And I want to go a little bit into what the Buddha taught, because this taps into our greater Dharma on this planet, our greater purpose, which the Buddha would say is to free ourselves from suffering, or to free ourselves from dukkha. Dukkha is another word that we can probably spend a whole Dharma talk on, elaborating on the different definitions of dukkha. You might have heard it as suffering or chronic dissatisfaction or unease or ill being, to contrast with well being. Rather than well being, it is ill being. So the Buddha is famously quoted to have said, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. That's it. And that is what the teachings are designed to do, to free ourselves from suffering, which you will find similarly on the yogic path, on the Jain path. The fundamental greater purpose and point of this world is to free ourselves from suffering, from dis-ease, unease, ill-being, and chronic dissatisfaction. And what did the Buddha say about freeing ourselves from suffering? He essentially taught that the problem is our desires. Problem is we are perennially wanting things to be different. Suffering is any time things are not what we wish them to be. So a common metaphor that people use is a common way, I'm told, I haven't fact checked this or tested it out myself, but a common way to trap a monkey is to put a delicious fruit in a little box with a little hole in it. And the monkey, of course, will reach his open hand into the hole or grab onto the fruit, in which case he will have to form kind of a larger fist in order to grab the fruit. And then he tries to pull his hand out, but his hand is stuck. And you can set your trap and come an hour later, and you will find the monkey trying its best to get the fruit out of the box. Now, all the monkey needs to do to become free is to let go, but it refuses. So that's a lovely metaphor for how our own attachments, our own desires, our own inability to let go keeps us stuck, keeps us in bondage, keeps us from liberation. So if you want to send an email to a monk, just make sure there's no attachments. That is fundamentally what the Buddha taught. We have to practice non attachment. Nothing to cling to as I, me, are mine. So essentially, these are the four noble truths. First noble truth says there is suffering, there is sickness, old age, and death, and nothing will prevent that from happening. Fortunately, there is a cause to suffering, our attachments and desire. There is an end to suffering, nirodha. And good news, there is a path out of suffering. So when we do talk about the Dharma, another way to think of this, other than teachings, is that path. Fundamentally, even when we get to the yogic path, the Jain path, the Buddha path, there's not a strict doctrine that one needs to learn. It is simply a path where the destination is freedom from suffering. So, another way to think of Dharma, other than teaching, is method. It's simply a raft to get you to the other side of the shore that frees you from suffering. And as we're practicing letting go, what happens when you get to the other end of the shore with your raft? You take the raft with you? No, you have to let go of that too. So we even let go of the method itself once it has fulfilled its purpose. So if you go to different places in Southeast Asia, particularly Buddhist temples, you'll see a symbol very commonly known as the Dharma chakra. Now, chakra might sound familiar for us yogis. We know about our chakra system. And chakra is a Sanskrit word that simply means wheel. So the Dharma chakra is the wheel of Dharma. And it is said, particularly when the Shakyamuni Buddha became awake, he turned the wheel of Dharma, or he began the turning of the wheel so that all sentient beings could become free of suffering. Now, when you do look at the wheel, or you do see a Dharma chakra somewhere at a temple, I encourage you to count how many spokes are on the wheel. You might see Dharma chakras with 3 spokes, 4 spokes, 10 spokes. Some even have 30 spokes. But my favorite ones are those with 8 spokes on the wheel, because those 8 spokes represent the noble eightfold path. So again, even when we say teaching, we can equate that with a path to alleviate suffering. And that is the fourth noble truth, that there is a path to take us there. And that path is the eightfold path, at least how it goes in Buddhism. Now, I want to talk just briefly about this noble eightfold path, because one of the spokes on the wheel, one of the factors of the eightfold path is right mindfulness. In fact, all of the steps on the Noble Eightfold Path have right as the first word. Right livelihood, right view, right mindfulness. So it's not right as in right and wrong. It's right as in aligned, which is to say, like, if a building is leaning over, you need to right it. It needs to right itself. So I talk about this particularly because people talk about mindfulness a lot, and there's more and more things coming out about how mindfulness is very useful for our own mental and emotional health. But I also encourage you to recognize that even when we talk about mindfulness, there's a right mindfulness and there's a wrong mindfulness. And if we're just practicing mindfulness, as I like to say, it's about 1/16 of the path. Not only is it half of mindfulness to begin with, but it's only an eighth of the Eightfold Path, of which there are 7 other branches that we need to bring into our practice. So, yes, you could be the CEO of, I'll say, a big oil company and wake up every day with mindfulness, but you might not be practicing right livelihood. And if you're not practicing the other spokes on the wheel, your practice will be incomplete. So we can also see the same basic idea that teachings mean path, mean method with the yogic path. So also a couple millennia ago, Patanjali elaborated on his Ashtanga system. Ashta simply means 8 and Anga means limb. So we also have the Ashtanga system, which again is not a doctrine, is not a set of beliefs that one must adhere to. It's simply directions. It's simply a path, a dharma, if you will. It basically says if you follow this path, it will get you to this destination. And I will again point out that one step on Patanjali's Eightfold Path is asana, is the physical postures that we practice in yoga. Now, in Patanjali's time, asana was just a sitting position, but we've since evolved it into all the physical postures that we bring into our yoga practice. And again, I encourage you to recognize that if we're only practicing asana, if we're not, say, following the ethical precepts of not killing, not lying, not stealing, not being greedy, then our path is incomplete. We're not going to make it to the final destination. It's like the Google Map directions. If you miss that right turn, none of your other directions are going to make any sense. And if we even think about Swami Vivekananda's 4 paths of yoga, Patanjali's path is just one of those. It's the Raja path, the path of self-discipline and mastery. But we also can't forget about the Jnana path of self-knowledge, the Bhakti path of devotion, and the karmic path of selfless service. So if just practicing mindfulness, not even right mindfulness, is 1/16 of the path, then guess what? Just practicing asana is 1/32 of the path, because we can also practice bhakti and karma and raja and jnana. So the important thing to recognize about this idea of dharma, it is that it is a path that you walk. If you don't walk it, you're not going to get there. So there is the humorous line that there is Zen and reading all the books about Zen, which is to say that this is an experience that we're seeking. And you could read all the books you can read all the books there are out there about chocolate. For example, you could go to college and get a PhD in chocolate studies, but no amount of study, no amount of reading is going to tell you the experience of tasting chocolate for the first time. So these teachings are participatory. They are methods that we employ to take us to certain places on the path. So you have to walk it. That's the only way. So like the guy in the ShamWow commercial, But wait, there's more. So far, we've talked about Dharma as duty, purpose. We've also talked about it as teaching, method, and path. But you might have also heard this idea of Dharma as the natural way of things. You might have heard it as synonymous with the Tao, the way. You might have heard it to mean phenomena. You might have also heard it to mean law. And even with law, we can unpack that a little bit further. Because when I mentioned earlier that in our individualistic society, people tend to not like the idea of duty or doing things because we have to. But guess what? We all do things all the time because it's the right thing to do. When you drive down the street, you stop at the stop sign, you follow the speed limit. When you go to the store, you don't steal things from the store, you purchase it with the money that you have. So we can also just take Dharma to mean the laws of human beings, or basically just general behavior that we can do in the world that doesn't create suffering for others. So not only can it simply mean the law of human beings, but can also mean a greater cosmic law or the laws of nature. So I even think the term is the law of gravity. Maybe it's just the theory of gravity. But basically, when we think about the theory of relativity, the theory of gravity, Newton and Einstein, they didn't invent these theories out of thin air. They simply observed the phenomena of the natural universe and realized that these formula, this understanding, is inherent to the universe itself. We did not invent gravity, we simply observed it and then wrote about it in our theories and in our own laws. So, in the same way, the Dharma is not some made up theory, it's a natural observation into the way things are. Oh, I remember. We have laws of thermodynamics, is where the laws come. First law of thermodynamics, second law of thermodynamics. And the main difference between law as Dharma and the law of thermodynamics is that we don't need an electron microscope. We don't need a particle accelerator to discover the laws of the universe. The only tool that we need is our own mind. So Franz Kafka put it this way: be quiet, still, and solitary. The world will freely offer itself to you to be unmasked. It has no choice. It will roll in ecstasy at your feet. So when we talk about Dharma as meaning the natural way of things, we can recognize it's right here. It is available to everyone at all times, no matter where you are or what you are doing. It's right here in front of us. As the Zen Buddhist Mumun said, the gate is wide open. Nothing blocks your way. As Jack Kornfield says, the Dharma is universal. It's immediate, it's open handed, it's to be experienced by each person for themselves directly. It's timeless. The truth of life is here to be discovered for any individual with eyes open to see. Another spiritual story that I love goes like this. A young man catches a small bird and holds it behind his back. He then goes to his master and says, Master, you are an enlightened monk. You know the ways of the Dharma. Is the bird I hold in my hand alive or dead? The boy thought this would be a great opportunity to play a trick on his master. If the master answered dead, he would simply let the bird loose. If the master answered alive, he would break the bird's neck behind his back and then show him the dead bird, thus proving his master wrong. The master looked at his young student and said, the answer is in your hands. So the Dharma the way of life, it's here. It's all around us. The answer is in our hands. The Dharma is to be found in our own breath itself. We have enough time for this poem. Adam Zagajewski wrote, "Wait for an autumn day, for a slightly wary sun, for dusty air, a pale day's weather. Wait for the maple's rough brown leaves, etched like an old man's hands, for chestnuts and acorns, for an evening when you sit in the garden with a notebook and the bonfire's smoke contains the heady taste of ungettable wisdom. Wait for afternoons shorter than an athlete's breath, for a truce among the clouds, for the silence of trees. For the moment when you reach absolute peace and accept the thought that what you've lost is gone for good." I love that this poem just says, wait, because that's essentially what we're doing to get in touch with the Dharma. We're simply sitting still. And just as we allow the breath to come to us, we can allow the wisdom of the Tao or the way naturally arise within ourselves. We don't need to go to the library, read all the books, get a PhD in life. Life is available right here and right now in the present moment. Life is only and will only ever be available in this present moment. So when we talk about this way of things, we talk about this Tao, there's a natural order and harmony to the universe that we are getting in touch with. So just the same way you see like a vine traveling up a wall, it doesn't go perfectly straight. It curves in mysterious ways. And that curve and that flow is the Tao. It is the natural way of things. So on the one hand, those are the main conceptualizations of Dharma. We have duty, purpose, we have teachings and method, and we have laws, the laws of nature, the cosmic laws of the universe, the Tao, and the natural way of things. And it's easy to think that these are completely separate definitions, completely separate conceptualizations of what the Dharma is. But just as our path is to see the unity behind diversity, to see the oneness behind the manyness, we can also recognize that purpose, teachings, laws of nature, all of these seemingly separate things are one. Lucille Clifton put it this way: the leaves believe, such letting go is love, such love is faith, such faith is grace, such grace is God. I agree with the leaves. I'll say that one more time. The leaves believe, such letting go is love, such love is faith, such faith is grace, such grace is God. I agree with the leaves. Which is to say, what we think is separate is one. You are not separate from life itself. So, of course, your duty, your purpose is to align yourself with the natural harmony of all that is. It is to agree with the leaves. It is to say yes to life, to shift away from swimming against the current to turning around and letting the current take you. So Ryokan, an 18th century Zen poet, wrote, to find the Buddhist law, so again, just one way to translate Dharma, to find the Buddhist law, drift east, drift west, come and go, entrusting yourself to the waves. So there's a lovely series of lines in the Tao Te Ching that goes like this. It is said that a novice butcher, aka somebody who chops up meat to serve, a novice butcher goes through one knife every single day because he hacks and chops away at the meat, thereby dulling the knife very quickly. An advanced butcher goes through one knife every year, as he knows just the way to cut the meat in the right way. But of course, a master butcher is able to use the same knife throughout his entire life because he has mastered the Tao. He has mastered the natural way of things. He knows exactly how to slide his knife along the muscle fibers, along the bone of the animal, so that his knife just slices through like butter. So when we too are aligned with life and aligned with the Tao, things suddenly just become easier. So we're here to align ourselves with life. Maria Sabina put it this way: heal yourself with the light of the sun and the rays of the moon, with the sound of the river and the waterfall, with the swaying of the sea and the fluttering of birds. Heal yourself with mint, neem, and eucalyptus. Sweeten with lavender, rosemary, and chamomile. Hug yourself with the cocoa bean and a hint of cinnamon. Put love in tea instead of sugar and drink it looking at the stars. Heal yourself with the kisses that the wind gives you and the hugs of the rain. Stand strong with your bare feet on the ground and with everything that comes from it. Be smarter every day by listening to your intuition, looking at the world with your forehead. Jump, dance, sing so that you live happier. Heal yourself with beautiful love and always remember you are the medicine. Hmm. So I do find when we discover our purpose in this life, a natural ease arises. Often people feel like they are swimming against the current. And what happens when you swim against the current? You work very hard, you get exhausted, you almost drown, and you get nowhere. But if you were to turn and go with the current, life naturally unfolds. Very little effort is required. So I even think that these Dharma talks are my Dharma. And like Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, you must act with non attachment to the actions. I am just fulfilling my Dharma right now. Whether there's one person in the room or 100 people in the room, for me, it is the same. I am fulfilling my Dharma. I am going in the exact way that life wants me to go. At least I hope so. The point being, there is a way for you to go in this world, but the mind won't get you there because this world cannot be grasped by the mind. Discursive thought and weighing the pros and cons won't get you to your Dharma. It is the natural way and order of things. Lame Deer, the Native American man, put it this way: all creatures exist for a purpose. Even an ant knows what that purpose is, not with its brain, but somehow it knows. Only human beings have come to a point where they no longer know why they exist. They don't use their brains and they have forgotten the secret knowledge of their bodies, their senses, or their dreams. Mhm. So there's a story of well, as most stories go, there's always three situations, with the final situation telling you how you should live your life. So in this particular story, there is an ant drowning in a rain barrel. And one monk comes along and he looks at the ant and he says, oh, if I save this ant's life, I will get good karma, and that will give me a fortuitous future life. So he picks up the ant and sets it down on dry land and continues about his day. The next monk comes along and says, "Oh, this ant is drowning. I should probably not interfere. This is the natural way of things. Creatures eat other creatures, creatures drown in water." And he moves on without saving the ant. The third monk, of course, the wisest monk of them all, comes up to the rain barrel, looks at the ant, scoops it up, sets it down, and goes along his way. Not a single discursive thought. He's in harmony. He's in the Tao. We do good things because it's in our nature to do good things, not because we are hoping for some great reward in the afterlife, but because it is in our nature to be good, to become awake. Meister Eckhart put it this way: when I was the stream, when I was the forest, when I was still the field, when I was every hoof, foot, fin, and wing, when I was the sky itself, no one ever asked me, did I have a purpose? No one ever wondered, was there anything I might need? For there was nothing I could not love. So simply to close out, we can point out that in story after story about what enlightenment is, about what awakening is, the fundamental description is that it's nothing special. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Of course, it's nothing special because it is life and reality, just as it is. It's not something far off in the future to attain. It's already right here, life itself, to be met in this moment. And our task, our path is to experience this yoking, this joining together, this coming together of these many meanings of Dharma, which are, of course, all one. You might feel lost, but that is, of course, because we are not connected to all that is. So we cultivate that connection to our bodies, to our breath, to the air, to the sun, to the skies. And all we have to do is wait patiently. So let's close out by again sitting for a few moments, recognizing everything you need is already right here. The answer is in your hands. Take a few moments, take a few deep breaths, and allow the breath to flow. No need to force or control the breath. Your body will breathe, just as your heart will love. And as you notice the breath and let go of any need or desire to force the breath or change the breath, deepen that letting go to touch all that is. Allow yourself to be just as you are, who you are in this moment. Allow this world to be just as it is. Meet this moment and this reality as it is. Come into the here and now. Life is only and will only be available in the here and now. Let go of resistance that causes dukkha. The leaves believe, such letting go is love. Such love is faith. Such faith is grace. Such grace is God. I agree with the leaves. As Zen Master Dogen says, enlightenment is intimacy with all things. It is saying yes to life, agreeing with the leaves, the winds, saying yes to this moment, yes to you. And thank you for sharing your practice, presence, love, and light with me today. Namaste.